Roughly 2 years ago, I made a video on one of my other channels explaining why I believe that Jokic had a very legitimate case to be the greatest offensive player of all time. I laid down my case, showed footage, numbers to back up my claims, and effectively what it came down to it is, even if I don't believe that Jokic is the greatest in one aspect of offense, the totality of what he brings every single night on a per possession basis on the offensive side of the floor is really hard to overlook, especially when so many other players in this argument are heavily flawed in certain aspects of basketball, or at bare minimum are nowhere near close to providing the same degree of value that Jokic may provide in some of their weakest areas. And actually, the start to this season has been so amazing that it's really hard to comprehend what exactly he is doing without actually watching the games. He has actually gotten better. To start the season, in the first 11 games, Jokic is averaging a whopping 29 points, 11 assists, 13 rebounds, nearly 2 steals on shooting splits of 68, 42, and 86. And for my stat nerds out there, that results in a true shooting percentage north of 70%. Now, I must admit, the claim that he has gotten better offensively because of an 11-game sample size isn't the greatest, especially because for half of these games, he just wasn't that aggressive as a scorer. Several games in the beginning part of the season where he was barely attempting over 10 shots a game, so I think that's very fair. I cannot ignore these last 6 games and what he has shown to everyone in the NBA world, because for a player that already seemed to be a step or two ahead of everyone else, now it just seems like he is playing with NBA caliber players. The stretch started with a 34-point, 14-assist game against the Sacramento Kings, where he shot 63% from the field and 40% from behind the arc. He finished that up with a 33-point, 16-assist, 15-rebound triple-double against the Miami Heat, where he only missed 6 shots in the entire game. Then he had a couple of bad games here and there, at least to his standard, but the 2 games that really stand out was against the Sacramento Kings on the 11th, where he dropped 35 points, 7 assists, and shot 16 for 19 from the field, and then followed that game up with a 55-point performance against the Los Angeles Clippers. Of the 55 points, 25 of them were scored in the first quarter. That 55-point performance not only wrapped up a 6-game winning streak, but also provided a 6-game span where Jokic is averaging an astonishing 36 points, 11 assists, 12 rebounds, 2 steals, while shooting, and I cannot believe I'm about to say this, but 74% from the field, 55.6% from behind the arc, and 85.7% from the charity stripe. And for those who are wondering, that gives him a true shooting percentage of 83%. I have never seen a player produce with this level of volume and match it with that degree of efficiency. At this point, Jokic is so impactful and efficient that it's basically money guaranteed of the outcome of not only his stat line, but the game as well. And if you don't believe me, you can try all of this out with today's sponsors and Kalshi. Today's video is sponsored by Kalshi. Have you ever been watching an NBA game and you thought to yourself, man, I think I'm watching something very special? Like on opening night when Wemby was terrorizing the Dallas Mavericks, or last year's postseason run when Indiana was able to make historic comeback after historic comeback, and you had a really good feeling that you could predict the outcome of that game, but unfortunately you just couldn't act on your instincts. I certainly have the perfect platform for you, and that's Kalshi. Kalshi is the only place in the entire country where you can legally trade on real-world events in all 50 states. And I do mean any event that you can think of. Politics, the Grammys, and of course sports, Kalshi has you covered. And with the NBA season tipping off, if you want to make the proper predictions, Kalshi has your back. Everything for your predictions on MVP, DPOY, even on a game-to-game basis, Kalshi gives you all the available options possible. And the one thing that I really like about Kalshi is that you can treat it just like an open market. They give you as much information as possible. You can see the trends before you actually put money down on your predictions. And even when you feel more confident about one prediction in contrast to another one that you may have already made, you can literally trade from one prediction to the next, just like an open market. And to make things even better, Kalshi is giving you $10 free when you sign up and trade with $100 if you use my link on the screen or in the description below. Again, click the link in the description to get $10 free when you sign up and trade with $100. And once more, thank you for Kalshi for sponsoring today's video. Now, for the people who believe that I may be overstating a 5 to 6 game sample size for Jokic, well, let me ask you this. When is the last time that you have ever seen a player produce 35 points per game while having a true shooting percentage north of 80? Forget the assists for a second. Let's just talk about scoring scoring the basketball at this degree of efficiency. I went throughout league history and I can only find one name, and that was Steph Curry back in 2021, where in April he had an amazing stretch where he was torching the league on crazy volume and even crazier efficiency. And yet still, in that 7-game stretch, Steph's true shooting percentage is not as high as the last 5 games that we've seen from Jokic. But still, very impressive from Steph. I actually remember that stretch. It was amazing. But if that's still not enough for you, if you're still not impressed, let's take it a step further. On the on-off numbers, when Jokic is on the floor, the Denver Nuggets have an offensive rating of 128. To put that in perspective, go back to 2017 with the Golden State Warriors, where they had a lineup of Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, and JaVale McGee that produced an offensive rating of 127.8, meaning that Jokic so far this season is so offensively great that it feels like you're playing the 2017 Warriors. And that's including the first 5 games of the season when he wasn't that aggressive at all. And for those who may be wondering, what is his offensive rating when he's on the floor in this past 6-game stretch? It's 132.6. Then some of you may say, well, Lo, he's a big man who gets close to the rim. So as long as he's having a great stretch of finishing, then of course his numbers and efficiency across the board is going to be up. And for the people out there who consistently say this in my comment section or any conversation that you have with me, respectfully, you have to stop with this lie. You do not know what you are talking about. Jokic, though he is really great at finishing around the rim, he is not dependent on rim finishes to boost his degree of efficiency, because at any aspect of scoring, Jokic is an outlier amongst other outliers. So far this season, out of the 177 shot attempts that Jokic has taken, only 66 of them are within 5 feet from the basket. Everything else is effectively in the paint with a floater, a mid-range jump shot, or a 3-pointer. So no, this isn't just like layups and dunks at the rim. No. That's not what this is. This is someone with impeccable touch that is just making practically every shot that he looks at, especially over the last 6 games. Now, throughout the totality of the season, how does everything breaks down? In the restricted area, Jokic is converting 87% of his shots. In the paint non-restricted, it's 70%. On his mid-range jump shots, it's 81.8%. And on his 3-pointers, specifically above the break, he's converting those at a 41% clip. Shooting 70% and 81% on shots that are not within the restricted area. Effectively, some of the least efficient shots on the floor, he is now converting those at a rate of which Curry was making threes back in 2016. That's how great he is on the quote-unquote least efficient shots on the floor. And that is for the entire season, not even the hot 6-game stretch that I was referencing earlier. And just in case you are wondering, what exactly is he doing in those last 6 games? In the restricted area, 86%. In the paint non-restricted area, 71%. Mid-range jump shots, 9 for 10, 90% on his mid-range jumpers. Only missed 1. And above the break 3, 56%. 56% on above the break threes, and he's attempting 25 of them within a 6-game span. That is ridiculous. But oh no, it doesn't stop there. I decided to go back and watch some of these games. I watched that Clippers outing and part of that last Sacramento Kings game, but more importantly, I really wanted to see what he was doing over the last 6 games in contrast to what he was doing in the first 5. And a few things I've noticed out the gate. First things first, those first 5 games, Jokic was intentionally not being aggressive. He was effectively laying down a framework on how teams are going to be forced to defend the Denver Nuggets for the entire season. Not overly aggressive in terms of scoring ability, but certainly presenting himself as a scorer to set up his teammates pretty consistently and test out the waters on how much spacing that he truly has, which is by far one of the biggest takeaways that I've seen in these first 11 games, is that the degree of spacing that is now around Jokic is frightening. Last year, the biggest talking point early on in the season for the Nuggets was the lack of talent surrounding Jokic, in particular, the lack of 3-point shooting. If we go back and just look at some of the lineups that were being ran early on, when Jamal Murray and Aaron Gordon were in and out of lineups dealing with injuries in the first half of the season, you were forced to play lineups that featured Peyton Watson, Julian Strouthers, Russell Westbrook, effectively non-floor spacers around Jokic. This got to not only Jokic, but also Michael Malone, and the complaints really flew off the hinges. This was a concern that was aggressively addressed from the front office during the offseason, and now here we are where basically, the Nuggets are running lineups where there may be at most one non-floor spacing threat on the floor sharing time with Jokic. And when you look at the shooting splits, especially from behind the arc from everyone on his team, basically Christian Brown, Cameron Johnson, and Peyton Watson are the only three players that are not knocking down their threes. And Cameron Johnson still gets treated like he's a three-point threat. He's just going through a bad stretch. But Jamal Murray, 36% from three. Aaron Gordon, 45% from three. Tim Hardaway Jr., 46% from three. Bruce Brown, 42% from three. It's basically a bunch of three-point shooting threats surrounding Jokic every single time he's on the floor. And now, because he's laid the foundation early on this season, not being aggressive, testing the waters, trying to make sure everyone knows where they need to be at, in the last 5 to 6 games, he's been on an island single coverage with players that cannot defend him. We really saw this against the Clippers, where Ty Lue tried the whole gimmick of don't double Jokic, we'll make him a scorer, and he got burned by Jokic putting up 25 points in the first quarter and finishing the game with 55 points. Jokic is now at a point, because of the degree of floor spacing surrounding him, as well as his passing and playmaking and overall scoring ability, bro, it's becoming practically impossible to defend him. And what may be even scarier is that even though Jokic is leading the league in assists with 11 per game, the passes that he is doing, they're not that difficult at all. Sure, you have the occasional touchdown pass, you got a tip pass, a lob to Aaron Gordon. I'm not saying he's not doing anything that's sophisticated, but contrast what we've seen in the first 11 games to what we saw in the beginning of seasons prior. Jokic really isn't doing any high-level difficult passes anymore, and it's not because he can't do it, but it's because there's so much floor spacing around him. The reads are significantly easier than they have been in years past. And what's making it even more frightening is that now there's times where Jokic, who I believe already had some off-ball gravity, but he's having even more gravity. I saw Rudy Gobert touch Jokic and was afraid to rotate back to the rim and just give up open layups in that Minnesota game. I've seen times where teams are double teaming Jokic at the three-point line as if he is Stephen Curry, or on long twos. Jokic is getting doubled on long twos, and his teammates are just walking into open looks. It's actually frightening on what it looks like when you pair Jokic with a bunch of floor spacers and you force the opposing team to defend him on one-on-one matchups. It's crazy. It's ridiculous. I didn't think I would ever see a stretch like this from anyone in my entire lifetime, and yet here we are, Jokic, who was already producing at levels that, again, I would argue would make him the greatest offensive player of all time. But even if you didn't believe that, at worst, he was in top 5 conversations. Somehow, he is outdoing himself even more. And no, I don't think that these shooting splits are sustainable. Jokic could effectively have a stretch where he's only making 65% of his mid-range shots, only converting 73, 74% of his shots at the restricted area, 67% on his in the paint non-restricted area, floaters and stuff like that. And that would actually tank his splits. That would actually drop his splits. Right now, he's converting 78% of his twos. He could go on a stretch where he's now converting only 70% of his twos, and it would tank his splits. Now, do I think all of this is sustainable? No. Jokic is converting 78% of his two-pointers. He could literally convert 70% of his two-pointers, still be at the top of the league in terms of finishing at the basket, mid-range jump shots, but if he goes from 78 to 70, then it would crater his efficiency and his accuracy. So no, I don't think that this is sustainable long-term. But what I do believe will be constant is the degree of offensive potency that not only Jokic will produce at, but also the Denver Nuggets as well. They have started this season 9-2 with an offensive rating of 124.5, which is second best in the NBA, only behind the Houston Rockets. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know how much longer Houston can hold that title as the number 1 ranked offense in the NBA, because the way in which Jokic is playing, it's only a matter of time. And also defensively, bro, the Denver Nuggets are third best in the league as well, producing the second best net rating in the NBA at 13.4, which is crazy. It's crazy at a 13.4 net rating. It's only second best in the NBA, but when you're in the league with OKC, I mean, historic isn't good enough. You literally have to be the greatest of all time to be as good as OKC. But I do think it's crazy that we could be witnessing one of the greatest teams of all time, and it may go overlooked just because arguably the greatest team of all time could also exist in this exact same year, because what OKC is doing, it's really crazy, really crazy. And also, to be fair, it is an 11-game sample size. Some of the teams that they face haven't been the greatest, so all of these things can drop a bit. You'll definitely have some variance, not just with Jokic, but also with some of these other players as well. But I do think when you watch this team, when you watch Jokic in space, when he's been defended by one player, when you can't send a double because it's easy for him to make these reads, when he's scoring at will on anybody who goes up against him, when you see someone with the degree of gravity on and off ball at the 5 position, the value that he has when he draws a big out of the paint, like everything that Jokic provides to a team offensively, bro, it's really, really, really hard to deny. And hopefully a lot of this will translate to the playoffs. So when OKC and Denver inevitably match up, because at this point, I think those are the 2 best teams in the NBA. And it is very, very clear. When those 2 teams match up in the playoffs, it will be a bit more interesting of a series than we got last year. And last year was already a really great series. But I think now with this offense, the way it's performing, the level of floor spacing and the ceilings in which Jokic can reach, it's just really hard to beat this team, even if it is a slightly soft schedule. And unfortunately, we don't really get to see OKC and Denver match up until February, so that sucks. But I do think that as time continues to progress and the sample size continues to widen, I do think a lot of this stuff will continue to be sustainable. But hey, those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section below. Did I do a little bit too much glazing of Jokic this time? Because I know for a fact many people just know me as someone who's been really high on Jokic over the past handful of seasons. I believe that what he's doing in these first 11 to 6 games is certainly worth talking about. The same way we talked about Wemby, the same way I'm going to talk about the Pistons, the same way I'm going to talk about OKC. It's a bit too hard to deny what we're witnessing right now, because it really is that great. And as I just sat here and told you some of the videos coming up, if you want to watch those videos, make sure you hit the subscribe button and notification bell to be updated when those videos drop, because they will drop soon. But until then, I'll see you all later. Peace.